Before starting, Gerald and I wondered if we would go through meditation. All right, done. Then we thought we might jump into the matter. Earlier on, I was watching the clock and the hand clocks moving, and reminded me of when I was younger. I used to watch my wristwatch during classes, and not that I was annoyed or bored, but I was just. I thought that it was funny to see that. It's quite curious. We call that time. It's moving, but I don't feel like I'm moving or anything is moving. And I don't know if you've ever, thought about that. Adults tell you, so this is time moving. These hand clocks moving. Doesn't mean anything, in a direct experience. If you really, truly look at those clocks, there's not really time that is running, really. So what are we waiting for? Human beings tend to project everywhere in space and time, forgetting the most important here and now, direct experience, which is true. The mind wants to grab and everything. He wants to learn, he wants to understand, and awakening is the end of that. We stop this grabbing, and we just let life flow on its own. It liberates. For years, there's a character that is built on from childhood, from what we've been told, from what we've been told to do, how to behave, how to talk, how to interact. Little by little, that creates borders or limits. Everyone creates their limits, and at some point there's confrontations that start appearing. We all know that we can't be defined. If someone points toward you, you're like this, like this, like this. Everyone knows deep inside that it's not true. Even the qualities, all qualities and qualifications that we can tell about you, you don't like them. You don't like to be limited to that. Because what you are can't be defined. That's not possible. So there's a grief that needs to be gone through. The truth of what you are will never be definable. You can't define it, and the mind needs to understand it. Well, mind doesn't want to understand. It can't be grasped. As long as we want to grasp, that's not it. So we go through another way. What is there before the mind? I can see that there's not a lot of thoughts in your minds right now, which is quite cool. It's that space that is interesting. This is where we need to focus.
Oui. Les premiers sages, les premiers yogis,
The first yogis
l'état d'union, donc
used to say that yoga, the state of union, unity, it is the stopping of the fluctuations of the waves in the mind, from the mind. And when we stop following those fluctuations, what reveals itself automatically is what is stable and permanent. That's the goal of Satsang, to reveal that, this stability. Sat, which is true, the truth, real. Sangha means gathering, to gather. But the truth, we can point toward truth, but it can't be enunciated, can't be told. I know that there's a bit of distance with religion in Canada and Quebec, but Jesus comes in front of Ponce Pilate, and Ponce Pilate asks, what are you here for? And Jesus says, I'm just here to testify about the truth. And Ponce Pilate asks, what is the truth? And Jesus doesn't answer. That's the best answer. The same story with Manandamayi in India. We call the absolute Brahman in India. And someone asks her, what is Brahman? And Manandamayi doesn't answer. So he thinks that she hasn't heard him, so he asks louder, what is Brahman? Third time, what is Brahman? Manandamayi actually answers, I've already answered to you. Brahman is silence. It is a way to put it. It's just a direction. There are a few things that we can apprehend that don't move. Silence doesn't move. The space in which everything appears doesn't fluctuate. And most important, beingness never fluctuates. Beingness that watch these hand clocks moving just thinks, where is time? We see the body that is aging, but where is time? My grandmother who's 92, and I tell her, stay in your chair, forget that you're 92. Do you feel like you're 92? And she says, no. We don't feel being our age if we are in the body, but we believe the sensations. Being doesn't age. Beingness doesn't age. So the truth is another savor, but another sensation which is not corporal. It's not a bodily sensation. It's not energetic either. In India, they talk about more subtle than the subtle. Sort of indication there. Try and find what is subtler than the subtle. Sometimes I'm told, but there's nothing. This is where we start reaching something interesting. Who is there to testify about this nothing? There's no body, no personality anymore. Who is there then to say that there's nothing? What's interesting in finding that it's that afterwards we are free from whatever happens in this manifestation. Doesn't mean that we're not living fully this life and fully taste all the sensations. It just means that we stop living from the idea of being a person that has something to defend, to prove, to reivindicate, to carry, to grab.
ça devient très cool.
So it gets pretty cool.
Je me souviens quand j'étais en recherche, c'était vraiment.
I remember
prenant.
while I was seeking, I
Beaucoup, moi, sur le
wasn't laughing a lot when I was seeking.
Ouais. Par contre, après, on rigole parce qu'on se rend compte.
But afterwards, we do laugh a lot because we realize all that we've done for nothing, what we've looked for, even though it was already here. Like earlier on, we were, blocked in front of the door, and the key was under the mat. That's exactly my point. That's the same.
Donc il n'y a pas besoin de grand-chose.
There's no need for much.
Si déjà on ressent ne serait-ce qu'un tout petit peu le calme,
If at least we feel a little bit of this calm that is
on peut
underneath
déjà rester tranquillement
every
là,
sensations, we can stay
et avec
there
confiance,
and
laisser
trusting,
faire. Et ça va se faire.
and we just let things happen, and it will happen. It happens on its own.
Il n'y a rien à faire de spécial pour
There's
réaliser le soi.
nothing to do specifically to realize the self.
Vous n'avez pas choisi d'aspirer
You haven't
à
chosen
ça.
to aspire
Vous ne
towards
choisirez
that,
pas non plus du moment
for
où
that,
ça va arriver.
and you're not going to choose the moment when
Moi,
it's going to
j'imaginais que ça allait
happen.
arriver,
I thought it would happen for me while in a lotus position in samadhi, and
puis que j'allais rester un mois dans ma chambre après,
I would
savourer
stay
ça.
in my room for a month, savoring it,
Cliché spirituel.
all the cliches, spiritual
Non, ça m'est
clichés.
arrivé au volant d'une 106.
Well, no, it happened to me on a very old car, small car,
C'était même pas un Dodge ou un Ford, non, c'était juste une 106.
nothing fancy, really.
Ouais. C'est dans comme dirait un ami, c'est dans l'intraordinaire. C'est pas dans l'extraordinaire.
It
c'est
is
dans
in,
l'intraordinaire.
within the ordinary, in the intra-ordinary, within the very most ordinary.
Après, vous regardez les bulles de savon quand vous vous lavez les mains. C'est comme si c'était la première fois.
You look at the bubbles of the soap when you wash your hands, and it feels like it's the first time.
Une bulle de savon.
You might have forgotten, but when you were a child,
Comme la conscience, elle s'émerveillait juste devant
soap
une bulle
bubble
de savon ou un grain de
was
sable.
very important, or a grain of sand that is shining. That was something. I know it because I work with kids,
T'as pas oublié, quoi.
so you haven't forgotten.
Bonheur des enfants, c'est de péter les bulles. C'est ça. On fait des bulles.
I remember popping the bubbles.
On est là pour ça, on est là pour fêter les bulles.
Yeah, that's what we are here for, to bust the bubbles.
Ouais. Je suis sûr que même un petit chien, tu lui fais des bulles, il veut péter les bulles aussi.
Even the dog, I'm
Juste pas
sure.
mental,
I'm sure that a dog would want to
mental,
bust a
joue.
bubble too. Everything that is without a
Joue
mind,
avec tout.
it plays with
Parce que
everything.
la conscience,
Every
elle, par
being's
nature,
without a mind.
joue.
Because
Elle joue en
consciousness by
permanence.
nature is playful. It
Et
is
tout
playing all the
est
time.
émerveillement pour elle.
And all
Il y a
is
pas de-
marveling to
Il n'y
it.
a pas de différence.
There's no differences.
Tout peut être goûté, tout peut être
All
savouré.
can can be tasted and savored from very, from very much now. You don't need a realization to actually savor everything, every perceptions, every sensations, if possible, without adding any labels on top of it. Because what prevents us from this joy and this sense and this savor is the fact that we define and put labels on things. For instance, when we meditate with eyes closed, the mind keeps on visualizing a body in a space and still thinks that being in control of whatever is happening around it. But if you take the label out, this, meditation, body meditating, if you take it out, it's not the same anymore. That is the true tantric path, which is an ancestral path, is to go through senses, to reach or touch what is beyond senses, beyond the five senses, quintessence. And all that is perceived in this universe is just a game of vibrations. All is vibration dancing. That's all. Do you feel that it's dancing right now? Even what appears to be still is dancing. On the manifestation level. But what you are, truly, this consciousness that perceives this dance, never fluctuates. It's not dancing. The mind will always try and make us believe that it's hard to stay right here, right now, in this beingness. Just watch and see what happens when you're just being there. For those who are quite used to it, and there's a certain savor, taste to it, and we're quite happy. When we're not that used to it, the mind has a lot of tricks. The mind has when we're not used to it, the mind has a few tricks to try and take us out of this stillness. The mind, without realizing it, will start generating a boredom, wanting something more, something else, or a state of sleepiness. And everything, all of that needs to be seen so that you can't fall into this illusion. It's very funny to actually watch those mechanisms of boredom, of sleepiness. It all comes from unsatisfaction. Consciousness that sees is never impacted. Boredom can be tasted and savored. Sleepiness can be tasted. We can be fully present when the body is falling asleep. So what prevents us from staying right here still? What prevents us from staying still right here, right now? What prevents us from that, stay in this beingness and just savor and taste it? All those things that we need to do, this is what prevents us from being still. All the things that you do, does it change the very beingness? No, but it's still scary.
Est-ce que être bouge ou est-ce que c'est le corps qui bouge?
Is it beingness that is moving, or is it the body that is moving?
Est-ce que c'est la conscience qui bouge ou le
Consciousness,
corps qui bouge?
is consciousness moving or the body? But the body is moving, but consciousness
Donc, tu peux
is
voir
not
le corps
in the
faire,
body.
mais sans- et
Yes.
Toi, tu peux dormir pendant ce temps-là.
So you
Tu peux te reposer pendant que le corps bouge.
can actually rest while the body is
Donc, il y a un
moving.
problème.
So where's the problem? I don't know.
A priori, il n'y en a pas.
Ouais.
Looks like there isn't any.
On dit, les sages de l'Inde, ils disent, c'est en voyant
Sages in
l'action
India
dans
says that
l'inaction et
by
l'inaction
seeing
dans l'action
action in
qu'on est en yoga.
non-action,
C'est-à-dire qu'on est en union.
or and seeing inaction
pendant que tu
in
agis,
action, that we are
Il y a
truly in
forcément un point qui ne bouge pas en toi.
meditation.
Pour que tu marches, il faut forcément qu'il y ait un sol immobile.
For you to be able to walk,
Pour
you
que
need
tu
to have a
filmes sur
still
l'écran, il faut forcément qu'il y ait un
stillness.
blanc qui bouge.
For a movie to
tout faire
be
à partir de-
projected, you need a
cette
screen
immobilité.
that doesn't move. You can do everything from
C'est
this
simplement ne pas
stillness.
se laisser happer
It's just not to be
par le corps qui bouge.
sucked
c'est fatigant.
by the body that is moving. This is what's tiring.
Il y a une différence entre
There's a difference
contempler
between
des voitures
contemplating
qui passent
cars
devant toi et puis faire
driving
tout le temps ça à
in
chaque
front
fois
of
qu'il y a
you
une voiture qui passe.
and do this every time
Si t'es identifié,
a
c'est
car is
fatigant.
moving. If you're identified,
Si
it
tu
is
prends pour le corps qui
tiring.
bouge, c'est fatigant.
If you take yourself for the body that is moving,
Donc
it
ça
is
t'empêche pas de
tiring.
rester tranquille. Tu peux faire et
So
il n'y a pas de problème.
that doesn't prevent you from doing anything. There's no problem.
Qu'est-ce qui pourrait encore empêcher de rester tranquille?
What could prevent?
Comment?
What else could prevent that? The mind? Yeah, sure.
Le mental, tu le vois, tu vois les pensées.
You see the mind, right?
Est-ce que ceux qui voient les pensées bougent?
Whatever sees the
Est-ce que
mind,
ceux qui voient les pensées bougent?
does whatever sees the mind move?
Ou qu'est-ce qui
No.
t'empêche de te reposer pendant que le mental bouge?
So what prevents you from being still and rest while the mind is active? It's about a vigilance. It's about.
En fait,
It's not
la
simple.
seule vigilance à avoir, c'est pas
The
c'est
only
de ne pas
vigilance
se laisser
that you
entraîner
need
par le courant.
Is to
C'est
not
ça. En fait, c'est exactement la même chose qu'avec le corps.
fall into this current of thoughts. It's exactly the same as the body. There are forms like bodies, but there are forms like the thoughts. So are you following the thoughts, those forms?
Ça commence à faire fort.
Ok. Voilà.
There's a need for vigilance, not to fall into those current of thoughts. It's a
C'est pour
habit,
ça que la faculté de discernement est très importante.
which is why discernment is so
Parce que non
important.
seulement on embarque dans ses pensées,
Because
mais en plus on y
not
croit.
only do we
C'est ça.
fall into the thoughts, but we believe them as well. We need to de-learn.
Alors, il n'y a pas de il faut forcément.
Well,
Non, désapprendre.
we don't have to.
Ouais, désapprendre, oui.
De-learn, yes, is,
Désapprendre tout court.
but we don't have to do it. But yeah,
Ouais. Bah, sortir du prendre, en fait, c'est surtout ça. Mm.
to
Chaque
not
fois qu'un
seize
objet est vu,
anymore. We
il y a
need
une
to stop
saisie
seizing.
automatique
Every
qui
time
se fait parce
an
qu'on
object
a
is
été
seen,
habitué à ça depuis
we've
tout
been
petit,
trained
saisir tout ce qui était perçu.
as a child to seize everything that is
Mais on n'est
perceived,
pas obligé.
but we don't have to.
C'est le
It's
propre
not
du mental de tout
compulsory.
saisir, parce que le
It's
mental est
it's
là
the
pour ça.
very aim
Il veut
and
classifier,
goal
compartimenter depuis
of
que
the
vous êtes
mind is
petit,
to
on vous a dit,
seize
ça,
everything
c'est
that
bleu,
appears.
et ça, c'est
This
jaune, et
is
ça,
blue,
c'est
this
vert,
is
et ça,
yellow,
c'est
this
comment?
is green,
C'est gris,
and this
bleu. Il faut
this
tout définir
well,
comme
it's
ça,
grey,
absolument.
blue.
S'il y
And
a
you
une
have to
couleur que vous pouvez pas
define
définir, on va
everything.
vous en
If there's
vouloir.
a color that you can't
Faut
define,
absolument que
then
vous sachiez
you'll
ce que
be,
c'est la couleur.
you know,
Faut donner la
it
bonne
won't be. You
réponse.
won't be a good child. You have to have the right answer. Well, this is what I do with the kids.
En même temps, t'es dans le relatif.
Ouais.
Well, this
T'es
is
en
the.
même temps dans le relatif.
You are
Oui,
in the relative.
Tu vois, vraiment,
on a un rôle à jouer aussi.
There is a
si
role
tu
to
restes
play.
consciente,
If
tu
you
joues
stay
avec ça, quoi.
conscious, you just play with that.
Ouais. dans le satsang, on sort de
In
ce mode.
Satsang, we get out of this
Il n'y a
mode.
plus de questions-réponses.
There's no more question and
Ultimement, il n'y a
answer.
plus de questions, il n'y a plus de réponses.
Ultimately,
La
there's no more
question,
questions and
ce
no
sera
more
toujours
answers.
mental,
The
et
question
la
will
réponse, elle sera toujours
always
mentale.
be coming from the mind, and the answer will always be
Donc,
coming
faut voir
from
ce
the
qui est
mind.
avant ça.
So we need to
Ce qui est
see
là
what's prior to
Et même
that.
l'insatisfaction, elle est
Even
mentale.
unsatisfaction
C'est une croyance.
comes from the mind. It's a
Mental.
belief.
Si vous pouviez enlever ça maintenant,
If you could take that
ce serait
away now,
terminé. Il n'y aurait plus rien à faire d'autre.
there would be
Mais pour
nothing
qu'une
else to do.
illusion soit vue
But
comme
for
une
an illusion to be seen as an
elle
illusion,
doit être d'abord reconnue.
it needs to be recognized.
Quand on vous montre un tour de magie, au
When
début,
we show you
vous
a
doutez
magic
bien
trick,
qu'il y a un
you
truc.
know there's a trick, you know
Mais
there's
tant que vous n'avez pas
something.
vu le truc,
But as long as you haven't seen
vous
how
êtes
it
encore
works,
impressionné, on va
you're
dire.
still impressed in a way.
Une fois que vous avez vu le truc, vous avez
As
compris
soon
le
as
truc,
you've seen the trick
vous avez
and
même plus
understood it,
d'intérêt trop à
there's no
regarder le tour
more
de magie,
interest in even watching the
à
trick.
part s'il y a une belle colombe ou un beau
Well,
lapin,
even if there's
autant voir.
a beautiful bird or
Vous
a rabbit, or
vous contemplez,
you're
mais c'est
happy
plus tant le
to
tour qui vous
contemplate,
intéresse.
but it's not really the
C'est plutôt-
trick that is
Ça va être
interesting
la
to you.
beauté
It's the
de-
beauty more,
La beauté de la mise en scène.
the beauty of
La
this
beauté du magicien, la beauté
magician,
du geste, du magicien.
the beauty of
La
the
beauté de,
gesture
voilà, du
from the
décor.
magician,
Mais ça va
or
plus être- vous
beauty
allez
of
plus
the
être hypnotisé par
decor, the background. But you won't be
C'est exactement pareil,
hypnotized
la réalisation,
anymore.
c'est ne plus se
Realization is the same,
faire,
is
attraper par ce tour de
not
magie,
to
de
be
croire
caught
qu'on est
into
juste
this
un petit
magic
bonhomme
trick that makes us
dans
believe
ce
that
monde.
we are a little character in the world.
Mais
It's
Ah oui,
so
c'est simple.
simple. Yes, it is very simple.
c'est très très
Et
simple.
c'est tellement simple qu'on a la
It is
croyance
so
qu'on va pas le
simple
faire, quoi. On va
that
pas
we
réussir, quoi.
believe
Alors,
that
c'est déjà fait.
we're not
Ouais.
going to be able to have it or get it, but it's already there. But this, if there's no more question or answer, if we are still seeking something, seeking
Oui, ça
beingness,
dépend.
it depends.
C'est pour ça que c'est important de se
That's
poser,
why
se
it's
poser la question,
it's
qu'est-ce que je veux
important to
vraiment?
ask yourself what is it that
Parce
you
qu'il y a
really
aussi
want,
une certaine jouissance au niveau du
because
mental,
there is
surtout en France,
an
parce que
enjoyment
les
in
philosophies,
with
les
the mind,
philosophes et tout
especially
ça.
in France, with
C'est
all
très
the
jouissif de
philosophers and
raconter des
thinkers.
histoires.
It's very enjoyable to actually tell, you know, what if I was a tree? Maybe.
D'être un arbre.
How does it feel to be a tree?
Ouais. Mais il faut savoir si on veut vraiment percer à jour la vérité.
We need to know
ou
if
juste rester au niveau
we
de la
really
jouissance
want
mentale. Il y a
to
pas de problème
see
avec la
the
jouissance
truth,
mentale,
or
ça
if
peut
we
être
want to
marrant, mais
enjoy the mind. There's
Mais il y
nothing
aura
wrong
toujours
with
souffrance à la
enjoying the
clé.
mind, but there's just always
ça,
going to be
le truc.
suffering at the end of it.
c'est pas un concept qui libère.
A concept is
Pas
not
suffisant.
liberating. It's not enough.
Donc le truc, c'est pas un processus.
Non.
C'est pas une condition.
So it's not a process. It's not a continuity. So the thing is,
Oui.
Et donc, il y a des étoiles qui sont alignées pour ça. Vous avez été alignés peut-être.
so there was a sort of alignment from the stars, and I might be my own alignment, and I'm not conscious of it. And all of that through my mind, I know, I
La bascule, je suis encore très assise.
Ouais.
Après, j'ai plus rien à dire. C'est drôle, je suis même pas capable de finir ce que j'avais à dire.
I have trouble finishing what I'm trying to say. It just stops there. There's no answer really. There's no questions. It's just stopping right now.
C'est ça.
So that's it.
Ouais.
Yeah,
Mais c'est ça.
Ah ouais, c'est
indeed,
ça,
that's it.
Comme on disait tout à l'heure, c'est ineffable, quoi. On ne peut plus en parler à un moment donné.
You can't talk about it.
Ça sort même plus.
Mais non, hein.
It's
Tu peux
not
même pas
coming
mettre le nom
out.
dessus,
You
donc,
can't put any names on it.
Plus de la tête. Mais je dis pas rien d'autre.
C'est pour ça que c'est simple.
Reason why it's so simple.
Ouais.
If we are more interested in understanding than in being enlightened, does it mean that we'll never be enlightened?
En fait,
Well, the
il y a
question
pas de
is,
problème avec le fait de vouloir être intéressé
there's-
par comprendre.
there's no problem in
Simplement,
being in wanting to understand, but we have to understand that it's just a game from the character. But you need to see who is interested in, who wants to understand, and who in you is, or what is. But this phase of understanding is quite usual. There's a tendency to go through this intellectual phase to actually sharpen discernment, to be able to access truth. That is a great faculty that you have as a human being, which makes it so precious, because human beings have this capacity to discern the truth, what's real from what's not, what's permanent, what's still from what fluctuates. A human being has a capacity to discern from permanent joy and fleeting joy. So the joy that we can get from understanding something, like in doing maths, yes, for instance, it's still a human joy, and there's no problem with human joy. It is not forbidden. We still have enjoyment too. Yet it's just there's another joy that is underlying and is permanent still and fluctuates, doesn't fluctuate, and it's another identified, not identified. It is such not in need for anything that there's no more argument to justify itself. It's quite hard to talk. Because beingness is only now. So if there's only now, there's no more referential references. And I'm talking to you in French. I'm kind of out of now just by talking to you in French, because it refers to your past, because I've learned French. I have to protect myself backwards in the past to be able to speak French. There is a French guy that is sleeping within you. And the question is, within what the French guy or Canadian emerges. So there's no more unsatisfaction that is being felt, or boredom? Can't we feel some joy within sadness, in sadness? To be joyful and sad at the same time, where there's a duality right there. But it's the two at the same time. You can be conscious of the two of them at the same time. But permanent joy doesn't fluctuate. So there's only joy. There's nothing else, just joy. To understand that, there's a metaphor. Often I have people in satsang or meditation, how consciousness, absolute consciousness, which is all joy, love and peace, how can it create such a world with war, suffering, sadness? And for me to answer, well, how can you, consciousness, take so much pleasure watching movies with sadness or rom-com or war, and you're happy to cry because the heroine died, or there is suffering when there is identification. But that's the reason why we like going to the movie theater. It's because we know when... consciousness is free from every emotions, but it likes to taste itself in every sensation and perceptions. That's the reason why you like to see or watch a sad movie or war movie. So consciousness is not impacted or touched by the emotions, no.
Oui, bien sûr. Oui, tout à fait.
Sadness can exist, it has, but it's an experience. And consciousness is still here. It's just an experience from consciousness through matter, through manifestation. It is contemplating itself. It's just a support. This manifestation is the support for consciousness to taste itself. And everything can be lived. Everything can be experienced. So sadness or suffering doesn't stop existing, it's just a happening. Yeah, there's no more notion of existing or not. It's all is one, so it's undifferentiated. Consciousness is not affected, it can't be affected. It's not possible. Even you, within you, deep inside, you can't be moved or touched. And sadness has also a message, a meaning. Every emotion has a meaning, carrying a meaning. Sadness, more or less, means life in you. Consciousness knows that it needs to move on. And the mind wants to stay on the same page. So there's a friction between life that life wants to be dancing freely, and there's a resistance. And there's a resistance and a friction. Reason why there's a sort of contraction within the body. But as soon as we let life flow on its own without interfering, there's less. And even if there was a friction, it would be let go of immediately. It's not a problem anymore. Does consciousness... Is consciousness conscious of veiling its... is it conscious of being unconscious? It can play that game. It can go up to that. To that, yeah. It can do anything.
Tout en étant consciente d'elle-même.
It can be conscious of being unconscious while being conscious of being consciousness. Yes.
J'aime beaucoup quand on commence les questions par est-ce que la présence ou est-ce que la conscience, sous-entendu que c'est quelque chose d'extérieur à vous.
I like those questions, does or is consciousness, is presence, as if it is something that is outside of yourself and you're here and this is what you are. And you are here right now. You are already conscious of being unconscious of being consciousness. You are conscious of being veiled. I'm conscious of being unconscious, so you already know it. So you already know it. So you're already conscious. But yeah, but it doesn't change anything. It is not meant to change anything. You already are consciousness. Only consciousness can express what you've just said. So the mind is not the mind. Underlying, yes, it is always consciousness that is expressing itself. Consciousness plays this veiling game just to rediscover itself. Same with human beings, offering presents. You need the wrapping paper with a knot, on it. It's the same. It's the ego, the mind, is like the wrapping paper. You need this surprise effect. You know why? It's a bit weird. No, it's not weird. You wouldn't taste consciousness the same way you wouldn't the present without, if I was giving you some chocolate, and without the wrapping paper, it just would be, oh, thanks, chocolate. But with the surprise, it's even more tasteful. It's because it was veiled before, consciousness, you realize that, wow, I've always been the same, and everything I've been believing and carrying, that I wasn't needing that. And wow, what a relief. There's a different savor, it's not the same. There are exceptions. There are a few beings being born without any veils. But in a way, consciousness is happy to veil itself. Yeah, it can play that game. Yeah. There's nothing to do to de-veil or take away the veil, just being. It's a good beginning, a good start. Without, listening to the mind and just be in the moment right now. You just don't grasp or hold on to anything because you already are it. You just taste it. You just observe this movement. Yes, you can. The mind reacts and seizes. Consciousness is contemplating. So if you are more contemplating than seizing, it does relax, relieve a bit. There is a compass there. Every time there's an unsatisfaction, that means, no, that's not there. You need to go back north. Put yourself into the right direction, towards the right direction. Often you need to point toward lots of different directions to find the north. Reason why seekers usually go through a lot of experiences up to a point where we get so fed up with the very notion of experience, up to a point where no experiences, no ecstatic experience or energetic experience doesn't interest us anymore. There's still unsatisfaction, and we get really fed up with it. Usually, from that moment on, usually, not all the time. We're always looking for something else. And we come back to a state where we are peaceful, but then, whoop, it goes back on. Yeah, it's a loop. There's always this notion of, I need to move on and keep going, but nothing ever moves on or keeps going, never. You're never moving. It doesn't go backwards either. It's just about looking at what's here without identifying. Yeah, without identifying. What can you add or withdraw from now? And I'm talking about a radical now, not a second later or before, but very, very now. There's no time to add anything, because if you add, you're back in the past. It's too late. It's past. And now, you can't add a concept about the future. And beingness is only now. So every time the mind makes you believe that it's going to be happening later on, it's just blah, blah. It's just talk, talk, talk. The mind needs temporality to exist. Consciousness is timeless. If you realize now, you already are it, but you're not conscious of being now. So just by being aware of being now, without listening to the ego or the mind, you are consciously now. And it is really as simple as that. just
Il n'y a pas besoin
being
obligatoirement
conscious
de
of
passer
being
par tout
now.
un tas de
There's no
cheminements,
need to
ça-
go through any
c'est
sorts
pas
of
une
paths
obligation,
or
on n'est pas obligé de méditer pendant 20
we
ans,
don't
30 ans.
have to
On n'est pas
meditate
obligé
for
de faire le tour
20 or
du monde
30
pour
years.
rencontrer
We
tous les
don't have
maîtres du
to
monde, etc.
travel around the world and meet all the
Ça, c'est peut-être
sages.
éventuellement ce que peut vous faire
The
croire
ego,
votre ego en disant, il va falloir
the
que je fasse
mind
tel
might
parcours,
make
tel
you
tour du
believe
monde
that you
pour
need
rencontrer un tel- Ah,
to
j'ai entendu parler
to
d'un
go
homme qui
and
est là,
see
vous êtes-
this master,
On
meet
peut le
that
faire,
those
c'est pas une
people,
obligation.
but there's no compulsory. You can, but it doesn't have to. Well, it sounds easy in satsang, but 24/7. Well, does 24/7 exist really?
C'est ce que j'allais te dire.
This is what I was about to ask also.
Pour ton mental, ouais, il y a 24
To,
heures. Pour
to the
ton mental, il
mind,
y a 24 heures.
there are 24 hours. But if we work or we have things to do,
Tu sais, nous, on n'a pas l'impression de travailler.
right now we don't feel like we're working. It's not working, and yet there's a lot of activities that go through us. So every instant, I don't know how to put it, but that we enter beingness, and something is
Ouais.
bugging
Parce
in
qu'encore
my
dans
mind.
maintenant, si on vous dit soyez maintenant, il
If-
peut encore rester l'identification encore.
If you hear be in the moment, be now, there still can be this identification with the body, but the body is a false perception. It's a perception, but it's not what you are.
Une dissociation qui doit être très nette.
There is a
entre ce qui est
discernment
vu
that
et
needs
ce
to
qui
be
voit.
seen.
Vous êtes ce qui voit.
You
Les
are
objets
what
ne
is
sont pas vous,
you
que
are
les
the
objets
seer,
vous percevez.
not what is
Dans un premier
seen.
temps. Après, il y a une réintégration.
This is the
Dans un
first
premier temps,
step.
il y a une séparation
First, you need
entre
to separate
les
yourself from
objets et le
from the
sujet.
objects and the
Il faut
subject.
trouver le sujet. Enfin,
You need to-
c'est comme vous voulez, mais
you have
le
to-
sujet pur doit être trouvé.
The subject, pure subject, needs to be found.
On dit je suis le corps.
We say, I am the
Il y a
body.
un renouvellement cellulaire tous les 7 ans. C'est-à-dire que là, il y a
The
aucune
body
de vos
is,
cellules
all the cells in your body are renewed every 7 years. So
Alors,
7
vous
years
êtes où, il y a
ago,
7 ans, si vous êtes là.
where were you 7 years ago? Because the cells that are now in your body
Les cellules
were
de
not
7 ans,
there
elles sont
7 years
toutes
ago.
mortes, les cellules actuelles, là.
In 7 years from now, all the cells will be gone and dead. And so where will you be?
Après, on dit je suis le mental, je suis les pensées.
So we say, I'm the body, then we say the mind and I am the thoughts, but in deep sleep, we know that there's no thoughts during deep sleep.
Donc,
There's
ça
no
veut dire que vous
mind.
disparaissez
So do you
dans
disappear
l'état de sommeil
when
profond.
you're in deep
Est-ce
sleep?
que vous n'existez plus? Est-ce que vous n'êtes
Do
plus
you
dans un
cease to
sommeil
exist?
profond?
Do you cease to be when you're in deep sleep?
Vous êtes ou vous n'êtes pas dans le sommeil
Are you or are you not in deep sleep? Well, we sleep,
profond? Non, mais quand tu dors, est-ce que tu es?
but are you? When you sleep, are you? Yes?
Ça ne t'empêche pas d'être.
Et
It
comment
doesn't
tu sais?
prevent you from being. And how do you know it? Well, because I wake up in the morning.
Ouais. Mm. Tout le monde sait dans sa conviction profonde que
Everyone
même
knows
dans l'état de sommeil profond,
deep
il est
within
là, il
that
existe.
they exist in deep sleep.
Ça veut dire que ce que vous êtes est antérieur à
Which
toutes les
means that
pensées,
what you are is prior to every thoughts, prior to the body, all the perceptions,
et y compris à la non-perception.
even the
Parce que si on dit que je suis
non-perception.
inconscient, il y a une conscience pour dire je suis inconscient.
Because if you say I'm unconscious, there's a consciousness that
La
can
conscience, c'est
say
encore un état
to
de-
see this unconsciousness. It's a state that
Donc,
is
qu'est-ce
seen,
qui est là
perceived. So what is
avant que tout apparaisse.
here before everything appears?
Ça veut dire qui je suis avant José.
So that means who am I before José?
Ovulé.
Oui.
Ovulé, et l'ovulation.
So who am I before the ovulation of my parents?
Oui, oui.
Ouais.
Yeah. So who am I before fecundation?
Ouais.
Quand je vous écoute, c'est sûr que mon mental est en mécanisme de. Il est en.
I can see my mind that is in a survival mode when I'm
Ouais.
listening to you. And I can see new mechanisms.
Est-ce que vous savez que vos mentales parlent des fois? C'est mon mental qui vous demande ça.
Ouais.
So every time I have a question, I know the mind is working all the time. I can see my mind is analyzing everything and trying to grasp and hold on to yours. It's a very tricky mind that I have.
Mais voilà le questionnement qui vient, là, j'ai dit, il faut que je le sorte parce que je suis prise dans ces questionnements.
I am caught up in those questionings, and I'm so caught up that it gets me quite emotional.
Ça, c'est la vraie vie de tous les jours quand je sors d'ici, ou juste quand je suis ici. Alors, c'est-tu pour mental, pour de vrai? J'ai envie de satisfaire ça? Probablement pas. Mais je vais vous donner le bénéfice.
C'est marrant, tu as dit, je vais retourner dans ce que je suis. Sous-entendu, tu peux perdre ce que tu es.
You've said that you will be returning to what you are. That means that you think that you can lose what you are. And it's important to realize that you can't lose what you are. It's not possible. And the mind can't analyze. The mind doesn't really exist. It's just a way of speaking. But the truth is, there's no mind. There's just thoughts arising in a conscious field. So the mind doesn't think itself. There's no one to think the thoughts. I don't know if it's clear, but the thoughts are emerging on their own. There are no thoughts that you are creating. Like I ask often, what is going to be your next thought? Most of the time there's even a blank. And you know why? There's no thoughts there because you turn yourself toward the source of the thoughts. When I ask you, tell me what your next thought is going to be, you turn yourself towards the source. And the source is thoughtless. For those who like meditating in silence, just ask yourself, what is going to be the next thought? You'll see that the mind is it's quite radical. It's going to drop down and stop. So the mind is not talking, it's just a tool. It's not really the mouth that is speaking. It's consciousness that is speaking. Consciousness animates thoughts, animates everything, but it's not affected with the mind or without a mind, with thoughts or without thoughts, with a mouth or without a mouth. It's the same. Because when this mouth is speaking, it's still silence, absolute silence. And it doesn't change anything at all, at all, at all. And I'm never leaving who I am, with a mind or without a mind, with a mind that is overexcited or a mind that is quite calm. And the body can do whatever it wants. It doesn't change anything. There's no need to play the role of a spiritual being, taking this posture or doing this or that to actually correspond to what pure consciousness looks like. There's no need for that label. Consciousness is pure by essence, whatever you do. There's no need for labels. Meditative or spiritual, to have a behavior that matches the ideal of a spiritual being. If consciousness makes us words or thoughts or makes us think, why is it doing? You just need to understand how the mind works. It's a tool that is useful in this world, and it's a program. It's like a computer.
Vous mettez les programmes que vous voulez.
You put whatever programs you want.
Avant de réaliser le soi, il y a une étape intermédiaire, c'est de déjà remettre à jour le programme.
There is an intermediary
de croire en
stage.
Donc, à chaque fois qu'il y a une pensée négative qui vient, je peux pas, je suis pas capable.
You just have to reprogram yourself. Like I'm not capable or I'm not worthy. Before we say in India that before realization there's this step, or where you have to just reprogram yourself, which is why you have such a infinite creative force. You have what you can create is infinite, but we tend to restrain ourselves to thoughts. But the thoughts are never new. They are programs. There's no inspirations that come from the mind. Inspiration always comes from somewhere else.
Est-ce que j'ai répondu à ta question?
Have I answered your question? What is affected? What is suffering? Was it the question you wanted to ask? Yeah, see, we are all one.
Ok, qu'est-ce qui souffre?
What is suffering?
T'as vraiment l'impression de souffrir?
Do you really feel like you're suffering? Sometimes I do. Right now? No. But I've experienced suffering, pain, sadness, anger. If consciousness is not affected, what is feeling those emotions? What makes you believe that you are feeling those emotions? Well, I have perceptions. I feel them. Yeah, I would say that I... But what is telling you this? I feel something. Is it your heart or is it the mind and thoughts? And then it stigmatizes in the body or another way. There's always a scenario. Thoughts. It doesn't, spontaneously arise. Well, we do go through life through feelings and sensations. If I walk in the street and I hurt my foot, then what is hurting you? Well, my foot. Okay, that's a good beginning. What makes us suffer? It's a creation that we could call the little me, the true me, is absolute consciousness, the absolute. What you feel can't be unrooted and unmovable. But on top of that, there's a little me that has been learned, has been created, that is with a name, an age, a meaning to life. It's been given a role, sister, father, mother, child. But this little me, it has a kind of a territory to itself, to himself. So there's the shape of the body, but also all the concepts, even the ideas. Ideas actually cut up a certain shape of ourselves. Ideas create a shape of ourselves. Like, I believe that it would be good that on this earth we shouldn't have any more industries polluting the earth, because I've been told ever since I was a child that the earth should be preserved and we shouldn't be hurting nature, and all of that is creating a territory of ideas. And from that, you will meet CEO of an industry that is polluting a lot, and this shape of a little me is going to be in conflict with this CEO's little me. Well, there are things that are more deep than that, like your child dies in front of your eyes. It hurts. Well, your child is part of this cutting out, this cutout role as a mother, like my child. This possessivity, because the little me thinks and feels like he's cut out. And you know deep down, you know that you are infinite. So you keep on wanting to add, and you want to feel whole again. So you grab outside, and so it creates those my this, my that, to feel whole again. And all those my's, it creates an attachment. Very, very strong, and those attachments create suffering and pain when we identify with that. Doesn't mean you're not going to play your role as a mother. Doesn't mean that because you've realized the self, you're not going to play the role of a mother. But rather than going through this idea of my life, personal life, and life of my child, you feel and live that it is life that is sustaining you and everything, and you, little me, need to recognize that you have no control over this. You, little me, you don't have the power to make your heart beat even one single beat. You have no power as a little me. Reason why is to surrender. In India, we talk a lot about surrendering. It's a very fast path, an absolute trust in life, a surrendering. And the little me, what is it? This idea of being a person, to be limited. It's just an idea, only an idea. Me is only an idea that is learned and believed to be true. But when we feel this suffering, it's more than idea. Well, let me give you an example. A friend of mine was in Lebanon and actually went through war, and she saw people dying in front of her. And the pain was so strong, something emerged within her. And what if I was telling myself that those are not my friends and not my family, and what would happen? And she's been hurt during this war. She actually managed to, she doesn't know how she did it, but she saw it. She became the witness, an observer, and she could see that she wasn't suffering anymore because she saw people disappearing. She had, illness starting in her body because of the pain, and she didn't know how she did it, but she stopped calling them my family, my children, but she realized the self soon after. She just became aware that it was just the mind telling her, the scenarios and thoughts like pre-established. And when she managed to put that within her, really recognize that, she couldn't really explain the process, but I could see how it was happening in her. And she could actually walk through streets where, there were bullets flying around and nothing happened to her. She was in total trust, and she realized the self. She just surrendered. She accepted that people could die and disappear in front of her, that she could die, and it ended everything. It was an extraordinary experience. So she created this little world in her mind. Yes,
Bien sûr,
it
elle a
was believed.
complètement cru, d'ailleurs.
Yes, it was.
Qui fait qu'elle peut réussir à se détacher. À partir du détachement.
Ouais, complètement, complètement.
And
Et pourtant, elle
this-
était dans un milieu extrême, si on peut dire.
yeah, she managed to believe this while being in a very wild environment.
Et d'ailleurs, après, quand elle marchait dans les rues,
And
il y avait des
afterwards,
snipers.
while
Après,
snipers,
une fois qu'elle a vécu ça, les gens se faisaient tirer dessus, recevaient des balles, elle ne recevait rien, ça lui est plus jamais arrivé.
you know, bullets were flying around, and she was walking in the street, and nothing was happening to her.
Elle n'a même pas été affectée par un
There was
quelque chose
once
après,
there was an
des gens qui étaient morts au
explosion,
sol et tout ça, quoi.
and
Rien.
nothing touched
C'est marrant parce
her.
qu'elle échappait à tout.
She was escaping every harm, every sort of harming, or there were no more suffering, no more fear, no more projections anymore. And
Alors, elle
could
avait
she
de la
feel
compassion,
compassion?
elle était pas
Yes.
attachée à la
Yes,
compassion,
there was,
sa compassion.
but it wasn't her compassion. She wasn't attached to it. It was a
Peut-être
whole.
qu'un jour, elle aura l'occasion de venir au Québec.
Maybe
Ça serait
she'll be
bien
able
qu'elle
to come to Quebec someday. It would be interesting.
Le petit personnage, il s'est créé.
So this little me was created.
Bien sûr.
La conscience.
Yes.
Et
So consciousness creates.
c'est encore une expérience de croyance.
Exactement.
It's still an experience of
Oui, oui,
believing.
c'est la
Yes,
conscience
yes.
qui s'expérimente.
It is consciousness that is experimenting itself. It is the wrapping paper.
Oui, c'est ça, carrément.
Voilà, faut défaire le nœud.
Just
Faut
have to
défaire le
unwrap
nœud. Et
it.
les émotions, justement,
And emotions
c'est senti
are
comme un nœud. Et le nœud est
Knots
une invitation.
that needs to be
L'invitation à dénouer,
untied.
justement, à lâcher.
It is an invite to let go, to untie everything,
Petit personnage qui veut tout saisir, qui veut tout même
to let go of this idea of a little me that wants to understand everything. But sometimes the knot is so strong,
Ça peut arriver comme ça aussi.
so tight,
Ça peut aussi se faire comme ça.
and it can snap sometimes because it's so tense. Yes.
Je me fais, ou vous me faites, ou on se fait.
On se fait.
On se fait.
Ah, ok. Difficile à regarder comment ça sonne. Bon, je n'étais pas là, je vous le jure. D'être ici, hein, vous dites, on est fait le cadeau.
What a gift that we are giving ourselves
Compréhension, beaucoup de mots, beaucoup de
by
mentale.
being here.
Non, compréhension mentale encore pour moi, je précise, ok, maintenant. Et voilà,
And that's it, really.
ça s'arrête encore.
I'm gonna cry again.
Je cherche mon idée, ben puis là, je suis certaine que vous avez compris plus que...
I know you understand me. I can't really express myself, but I know you know.
Il y a souvent quand on parle de détachement, tout de suite le
When
petit
we
moi, il
talk
voit ça
about
comme une
detachment, the
expérience
little me
qui a pas
sees it
l'air
as
fun.
an experience
Mais
that
je suis
is
sûr
not
que la
fun.
personne, sur le champ de bataille,
But
là,
I'm
elle
pretty
peut
sure that the
ressentir une
person,
grande
this
joie à ce
woman
moment-là.
on the battlefield,
Parce qu'en
was
fait,
feeling
c'est
a
l'inverse.
deep joy.
C'est à partir du moment, c'est un paradoxe.
It's a paradox.
Plus vous êtes
The more
détaché
you are detached,
en fait, plus vous sortez de l'idée de
the
moi,
more you get out
de
of
ma
this
vie,
idea of a
et
little me
plus
with my life,
vous
the
connectez
more
à la
you
vie.
connect
Et
to
donc, au contraire,
life in
dans un
itself.
premier temps, ça semble être un détachement.
It feels
Mais
like a
après,
detachment
la
at
vie
first,
que vous percevez en
but
vous,
then
enfin, c'est
the
la
life
perception, la
in-
vie que vous goûtez en vous,
the life that you
vous
taste
savez,
within
pas
you,
avec
you
le mental,
know,
mais vous le
not
savez,
with the mind, but you know, not,
c'est même pas du plus profond parce que ça veut rien dire, mais vous savez que tout est ça.
you know that all
Quand
is
j'ai écrit
that.
le livre avec Gerald,
When we were writing the book
c'est
with
écrit
Gerald,
dans le bouquin,
I
il m'a
think
dit,
it's
quand tu
written,
réalises le soi au
when
bout
you
du doigt,
realize the
au bout
self
du doigt,
in
c'est
the,
l'image.
at the tip of
Tu
your
réalises
finger,
la totalité en même temps.
you realize the
Et c'est
whole
exactement comme
at
ça.
the same time.
C'est, maintenant, c'est expliqué en physique quantique.
It is
Le
expressed
point quantique,
and explained
il y a
in
un point
quantum physics.
d'être.
There's
Chaque point de l'univers a l'information de tous
every
les autres points.
speck of universe
Chaque
has
conscience dans l'univers
has
a l'information de tous les
the
autres points
information
et
of every other
vit,
specks in the universe,
goûte à travers tous les autres points.
and every speck,
Et
every
ça, c'est
point
l'amour vrai.
tastes
C'est pas un amour conditionné
consciousness
dans
and
une seule
life in
direction.
every single point in universe. And this
Depuis tout
is,
petit, j'ai jamais eu l'élan d'avoir des enfants.
I never
Et
wished for
ça
kids,
présente
like
pas.
I've never had the wish for having kids.
Je demandais,
But
parce qu'à une époque, j'étais
for a
plutôt
while,
mystique, donc j'avais
I've
une
been quite
relation
mystical,
avec
so
Dieu.
I had a
Plus jeune, avant
relationship
l'union,
with
il y a
God
souvent une
before
relation
the
au
union,
repas à
the
la fin.
unity. So there's
Et
a
puis j'entendais souvent
often there's a
des voix,
relationship with
et là,
God, and so I used to
j'entendais à
hear
chaque fois,
voices,
t'auras des
and
milliers d'enfants.
there was this voice telling me, "You'll
Et en
have
fait, c'est vraiment comme
thousands
ça
of
que c'est
kids,"
goûté maintenant.
and I can taste it now.
Mais au point que c'est même
To the
plus
point
que les
where
êtres
it's
humains, c'est
not
pas que les
just
êtres humains,
human
c'est
beings,
quand je vois,
human beings, but
je sais pas si je vais parler de ça.
when I see, I don't. Will I read? Am I going to say it?
Tu peux, on est entre amis. Hein, c'est pas...
Well, you can. We are among friends here.
Moi, je prends le dernier exemple en date.
The very last
C'était
example,
ce midi, en fait,
it was
et en mangeant, donc j'avais la
this
fourchette,
during
je
lunch
pique
today.
dans un...
I was eating.
Je pique dans un chou brocoli. Et donc je regarde
I
le chou
actually grab a
Et là, je
broccoli,
vois
some broccoli.
Oui, c'est ça, brocoli. Parce que nous, en France, des fois, on dit broncoli, mais c'est brocoli. Hein. C'est important. Et donc, je regarde ce chou brocoli.
So I'm watching
et là,
it,
c'est pas
looking
expliqué
at
avec
it.
le mental, mais c'est comme si c'est le
I
même
can't-
amour qu'une mère pour son enfant.
I
C'est un
can't
amour
explain it,
absolu,
but
total,
it's
inconditionnel.
the same love
Et tu vois-
as a
tu vois
mother
le
for his
brocoli
child,
comme
her
si
child,
c'était
and you see the broccoli as if
toute la beauté de l'univers.
you
est
see the
dedans.
beauty of the
C'est-
whole
il y a tout
universe
dedans.
in the broccoli. Were you hungry?
Et non,
Nope,
j'avais même pas faim.
I wasn't even hungry.
Non.
Que tu voulais bien avant ton brocoli.
Did-
En fait, ça se situe pas au niveau humain. Ça
It
se
is
situe
not
au niveau que
situated
la présence reconnaît la présence sous-jacente à la forme.
Its presence,
Et ça peut faire avec
recognizing
n'importe quelle forme.
presence
C'est comme
underlying
si tout ce qui existe,
all
c'est vos
forms.
enfants et c'est la réalité.
It is as if
La
everything
conscience
that
que vous
exists
êtes
is your child, and that's
porte la
the truth.
création en elle-même, comme la mère porte son enfant.
Consciousness
Tout ce que vous voyez, c'est
supports
votre enfant.
all this creation, all
La
that you see
manifestation
is
de
your
cet
child,
univers,
all this
c'est
manifestation,
l'enfant de la
this
conscience
universe
que vous êtes.
is the child of consciousness that you are. There's no separation. It
dans
is
votre
within you, in your
C'est une métaphore,
belly.
ça.
It's a metaphor, of course, but
Souvent, on pense que ce
Often
qu'on voit,
we
c'est à
think
l'extérieur de nous.
what
Le
we
mental
see
nous
is
fait croire
outside
ça.
of ourselves. It's the mind that
sans-
makes us
sans la
believe that,
conscience,
but
vous
without
pourrez rien
consciousness,
voir.
you couldn't be able to see anything.
Ce que vous voyez réellement,
What you see,
tout
really,
cet univers-là, il
all this
n'existerait pas
universe
sans vous.
wouldn't exist without you,
Sans vous, la conscience qui
without
voyez, donc
consciousness
vous êtes plus grand que l'univers. L'univers
who
apparaît
sees.
à l'intérieur
So you
de
are
vous.
bigger
C'est plus
than
grand
the
qu'une image,
universe.
il y a pas de
It's
niveau.
it's
Et
it's
ça
just an
apparaît à
image.
l'intérieur
There's
de
no
vous.
level. It's
Donc
it's
tout est en
just
vous, à
appearing within you, inside you.
Il y a un son continu là.
There is this buzzing in the background right now.
On pourrait croire que c'est à l'extérieur de nous.
We could think that it is outside
Si
of
on arrête
ourselves,
de croire qu'on est juste un corps,
but if we stop
on voit
believing
juste que
that
cette
we're
perception,
just
elle émerge
a
au sein de
body,
l'espace.
we just see that it's a perception that is emerging within space,
Et c'est ça que vous êtes.
and this is what you are.
Le corps, vous le voyez là.
The body, you can see it,
Ça
right?
prouve bien que c'est pas vous.
So it
C'est un objet
proves
vu.
that it's not you, it's an
Et ce
object that is
corps-là, il
seen,
apparaît
and
au
it
sein de l'espace
appears
conscient que vous
within
êtes.
this conscious field that you are.
Vous n'êtes pas limité au corps.
But you're
puisque
not
c'est un objet
limited to the
perçu.
body because it is a perceived object.
Et vous êtes capable de porter votre attention
And you are capable of shifting your attention
sur un espace conscient.
to
Peut-être que
a
les yeux
conscious
ouverts, c'est peut-être un peu plus dur.
field, maybe with eyes open. It
Lorsqu'on
might
ferme
be
les yeux, si on
harder,
arrête de
but
visualiser quoi
if
que
we
ce soit,
close
la
our
seule chose que
eyes
vous pensez,
and
c'est
we
un
stop
espace conscient. La seule chose que
visualizing,
vous percevez, pardon,
the only thing that you
que vous
perceive
vivez,
is
c'est même pas
a
une perception,
conscious
c'est un vécu.
space.
Vous vivez espace
It's not even
conscient,
perceived.
c'est votre
You
vécu.
live
Un
it.
espace
You
sans aucune
live
limite.
this spaceless,
Et
this
si,
limitless
là, par exemple,
space.
Si là, vous faites l'expérience que voilà, vous fermez ou non les yeux, peu importe.
Try it
Si
right
vous
now.
sentez l'espace conscient, la conscience,
If you feel this space of consciousness,
sans réfléchir,
without
est-ce que
thinking about
si
it,
vous amenez votre attention
if
ici,
you put your
est-ce que ça a un
attention
âge
there, does it have an age?
Est-ce que ça n'a pas toujours été là
Hasn't it always been here?
Est-ce que ça peut tomber malade
Can it fall ill?
Est-ce que ça a besoin d'évoluer
Does it need to evolve?
Est-ce qu'il manque quelque chose
Is anything missing?
Parce que le mental, il s'est rebranché.
So why are we trying to evolve? Because it's the mind that actually jump-started again. There's this, yeah, but humankind is constantly evolving, or yeah, but it's still humankind is a perception, right? You are the subject that is seeing this. It evolves just for fun, to play. It's just consciousness playing.
Vous avez qu'à voir à tous les niveaux, ça se voit.
You can see that on every level.
On a toujours la conscience a envie de s'expérimenter à travers.
Consciousness wants to experiment itself through a form, a shape, an experience, an expression.
Mais ça pourrait pas exister s'il n'y a pas quelque chose qui évolue pas, justement.
But none of that could exist without something that wasn't moving to experiment it. For movement to exist, you need stillness. For sounds to exist, you need silence underlying. If everyone is enlightened, that's already the case.
Conscient d'être conscient. D'être la conscience.
We're conscious of being consciousness, being conscious of itself, yes.
Elle jouera plus?
It's not going to play anymore then. Why not? Maybe, maybe not. Why wouldn't it play anymore?
Ouais.
Well, what game is it going to play if there's no more ego? Well, it can still go on playing differently.
Ça peut continuer à jouer.
We can keep on playing. Nature doesn't need an ego to play. Well, yeah, true. There is no ego in nature.
Il y a que l'humain qui pense qu'il est séparé de la nature.
Only human being believes himself to be separated from nature, which is why he talks about environment, you know, thinking that he's not part of nature. We are nature. We are life everywhere, but we function on a different way. Before coming to Quebec, my partner was, emotions were, she was going through quite some emotions, and we were in nature, and I just told her, look around you. What is functioning with the mind around you right now? Nothing. Only humans make a big deal out of their personal story. Birds don't ask themselves, I'm the one who's made my nest.
Ils agissent spontanément, ça se fait spontanément, c'est automatique.
It's automatic, it's spontaneous, and they don't think about what they're going to eat the day after. They don't ask themselves questions.
Donc en fait, tout se déroule de la même façon, sauf que
so everything happens
personne pour saisir quoi que ce soit.
The same way, but there's no more there's not
C'est libérateur.
a mind that is grasping this idea that it is a me that is doing everything.
J'allais justement y venir.
So if there's no ego, is there choice? No, actually. No, there is no choice. You just let whatever impulse arises drive you, right? It's not a choice.
C'est pas un choix.
So do you take every impulses as just, let's try that, or if there was such a thing as a choice, that would make me a prisoner.
Pourquoi?
Why?
Parce qu'il y a un choix entre ça et ça.
Because there's a choice between this and this, or this, and this, you know.
C'est trop petit.
It's countless.
La liberté, c'est quand il n'y a plus de choix, parce que
Freedom
un choix, ça veut dire que vous
is
êtes toujours restreint
choiceless.
entre la solution A et B.
A choice may, restrain you to A and B, really.
Voilà, c'est un texte que j'avais écrit, il n'y a plus que C, c'est-à-dire le cœur. Il n'y a plus
So,
A et B du mental, il n'y a que C. Ça s'exprime tout seul.
after a while, realize that the only choice that there is coming from the heart, really.
Souvent, quand tu fais un choix, ça part à partir d'une pensée. Je vais faire ça ou ça. Si tu n'as pas choisi tes pensées, tu n'as pas choisi tes choix non plus.
If you don't choose your thoughts, then you don't choose your choices. There's no such thing as a choice.
Ça se planifie de soi-même.
So nothing is planned in advance. It's planned on its own. But it's even things that are coming up in a month from now. It's happening now. It's not a projection. There's nothing to do.
Tout est dans maintenant. Tout est
And
maintenant.
everything is in now. Everything is
Ce qui est
now.
marrant, c'est que quand on est
And what's
vraiment
funny is
maintenant,
when we are really now,
on goûte davantage.
we taste more.
Ah, ça va paraître bizarre, mais bon.
It's gonna sound weird.
On sait davantage.
We know
ce qui se
more
dessine.
what is
Pourquoi?
gonna
Parce que
happen
ça s'en découle.
because
C'est
it's
comme
an unraveling.
Ah, ça c'est vraiment pas évident à expliquer. Le
It's
courant.
very hard to explain that the current,
Le futur est déterminé par rapport à maintenant.
the future is determined
Et
from
selon le feeling de maintenant, on peut savoir
now, and
l'orientation du futur.
from the
C'est marrant,
feeling
c'est plus on est
from
maintenant,
now we can know
plus on
what
sait à
the
l'avance que
future
ça va se passer
holds.
ou pas.
and the
Et donc,
more
c'est encore
now
plus
we
fluide.
are, the more fluid it
Très
becomes.
souvent, quasiment
We
tout le temps, en fait.
we kind of know what's going to
Je suis
happen.
prévenu à l'avance quand
Very
quelque chose va pas
often,
se faire, ouais.
I'm actually told, or I know,
Quand
I
il est
feel that
supposé y
something
avoir
is
une
not
frustration parce que quelque chose va bloquer,
gonna
je
happen.
le sais à l'avance. Donc comme je suis prévenu, il y a encore moins de...
So when there's a frustration that is going to come up, I already know because there's a tension in the body, so I know something is not going to happen. So we kind of laugh about it because we knew it's not, I'm not choosing it, it's just that I know in
Ils
advance.
vont me dire un truc, par exemple, qu'on avait prévu, et ils vont me dire, finalement, ça va pas se faire. Mais moi, je le sais déjà depuis 15 jours avant. Et la personne, elle me dit, ah, finalement, ça va pas se faire. Du coup, on rigole. Parce qu'on le sait.
Often people tell me we had planned something and the person will tell me, it's not going to happen. And I knew like 2 weeks ago, because I felt it, I have seen it already, and we just laugh about it because it's, if you are so, it can only happen now. If you are really caught by the thoughts, that can't be really happening to you, but nothing is determined. Now is ever changing. Well, it's not changing, but everything can happen in a fraction of a second. Everything could change too. So, as most of human beings are identified to the ego, the little me, and it's a program. So let's say you are program number 27, and you've been told that you were 27 ever since you were a child. So all your life will be, if you go through the mind only, all your life will be the program 27. And even if you download other applications or apps, and you try something else or softwares, it's not. If you don't get out of the program, it's not going to work. As long as you are in this character and you are predictable. When you realize what you become unpredictable, which is why some sages, might appear as absolutely crazy to the world because they've done things that made no sense to the mind, because they are out of the mind, really. It is true. Some of you already know that.
Toutes ces habitudes bien compartimentées, bien réglées,
all those habits that we have, they kind of broke down. They break down. You've been told that you should eat 3 times a day, you need to sleep, you need to behave in front of the lady, or you should wear these clothes. But presence, which is absolutely free, it could happen that it would do something entirely different. If it wants to do something else, it will. If it happens, it did happen a lot and often.
On alimente avec un tuyau, jamais de contact relationnel avec personne, juste pour s'assurer de sa survie. Il développera jamais.
If you take a child that is being just fed with tubes and without any contact with anyone, or he's going to leave the body without contact. There's no point for this baby to stay here. Because the consciousness actually comes into this manifestation to see itself and feel itself. Consciousness needs duality to see itself. This is the meaning of all this. So the baby needs to be in contact. It is actually its very first food. Love and attention are way more important. It is the very first food, even for human beings in general. It's
Dans les programmations qu'on parlait tantôt, j'ai 2 filles, puis tantôt on disait qu'ils sont dans le jeu, ils jouent, ils sont pas dans les cours.
I have 2 daughters.
Comment on les perçoit. Ma fille qui a 7 ans et demi, je vois
I can see that they used to just be playing without thinking, and she's turning 7. She's 7.5, and I can see that it's starting to change. She's taking things seriously. I can see that in her friends too. They see, children see adults behaving, so they start believing that they are truly a character and that they are going to die. Well, it was like that to me. They think that there's something to accomplish when there's 7. Is it what we ask them to do? Yes. We're always asking them to. We've been teaching them to. And the school is the same. We are teaching them that. Yes. So there is a need for a certain maturity for the brain before the consciousness starts veiling itself. Around the same ages, usually, yes.
Surtout le fait que les enfants baignent là-dedans, baignent dans cette idée qu'il faut absolument un but.
It arises from this environment where everyone thinks that they have a goal in life, and because they see that all the time, they start believing it. This is where suffering comes from, because when you start believing in a goal, then whatever is in between you and your goal, this is what makes you suffer, and children start feeling a friction, and there is a sadness there. When I was around 10, I started to be quite depressed because I couldn't see any meaning in that, to have a goal in this materialistic world, because we're going to die, so there's no achievement there. There's no definitive achievement. Whatever you can grasp in your hand, in the palm of your hand, it's going to turn to dust. There are exceptions, not all children. I'm just surprised that consciousness would do that at a certain age to every children. It feels like there's the brain needs to reach a certain level of maturity, and we tend not to let children be themselves. Like the first time they cry, we want them to stop. We try, and from the very beginning, we start telling them that
Ouais, c'est vrai qu'à ces âges-là, il y a une manifestation de l'ego qui est plus prononcée, et les humains appellent ça l'âge de raison.
Around those ages, 7, there is this manifestation in children of an ego that is quite strong, which we call the age of reason, but it's actually the reason. It's no reason. It's the age of... But it is the wrapping paper. It is this game. And can we help them? Not for them, but can we help them in our consciousness? Well, it's not your consciousness, it is only consciousness, and it's just consciousness that will express itself through this shape, through this form. It just happened. It's a happening. We could go into kindergartens and have satsangs there. I work with old people, elderly, and some of them have, Alzheimer's, and can they be more being? There's no more memory. I can see them suffering from not being able to remember a name. Can they reach? They're not reasoning anymore. They actually lose all the superficial. So we are here, we listen, we can read books, texts. There's no need for all of that to taste beingness. Quite often, elderly people lose memories and lose memory, but there is no need for memories to taste life. Life is now. And all those souvenirs and memories that are just, add on. But the story we are told and we tell ourselves is just in the mind. But nothing has ever, in direct experience, it never happened. It's all in the mind. And often, people who've realized the self, they have trouble with memory, quite often. Let me tell you that, and it's quite flagrant. But and you can ask them, but before realization, it's like they really can't explain anything. They're just now. They don't remember. And it can go even further than that. When consciousness sees through my eyes, you say about, watching suffering through my eyes. I find something, I think it's quite sad. I can't not do something for someone who's suffering in front of me. It's not consciousness that is unsettled. It's actually a conviction from this little me, from this territory of ideas that is unsettled by a situation. It creates a contraction. We tend to fall into the trap quite quickly at first, quite fast, but with the habit of looking, and we see the mechanism, and as soon as we see the mechanism, we know the why and the hows. And most of the time it echoes something. Must be something about unfairness in your story, in your program. I'm sure that if we were to go and have a look, it would echo what you're saying, echoes something in your life, and it's actually on purpose. It's actually purposeful, and it's not your consciousness, it is just consciousness that wants to reveal itself. So it's perfect, there's no such thing as a mistake. But every time something wasn't welcomed, every time we refuse the unity that we are, when we resist something, we actually put the distance. So we refuse the unity. So consciousness will actually play the game of putting you on a loop where you keep on tasting this thing that you haven't been tasting before. We talk about karma and cause and effect, and I've lived in Paris, and 3 times I've actually forgot without, I don't know why, but I just, for no reason, I wasn't trying to avoid, but I didn't have any tickets, metro, subway tickets. And those very 3 times, I was controlled, like someone actually checked.
La cause et l'effet, ça arrive direct. Ouais.
So the first step is welcome. Then, so I try and be conscious of my cereals in the morning. Well, everything, whatever gesture you do when you talk right now, it's the same. You could welcome everything now. When you say wanting to realize unity, well, it's not a will. Well, you've said it, I know, but when we have this deep aspiration, life will make everything resurface, all the points of duality, all the spec and ideas of duality, and so that we can see them and welcome them. So there's going to be situations where we can see all of that up until the point where everything is okay, but it's not something that happened on the human level. The character can't welcome everything. It's not okay to it, to the character. It's beyond the character. By definition, if there's a character, then there is duality. Because if there's a character, there's something around it. And even if you say, I'm a character within consciousness, then it's still two, and it's too much. The character, this idea of a character needs to drop, or it needs to be seen only as an idea. It's only an idea. What's your name? José. It's an idea, José, right? I could call you Nicole. Doesn't change. I don't know if I would turn around if you called me that.
D'ailleurs, c'est marrant parce que...
Je ressemble à quelqu'un que tu connais?
Non, c'est juste que... Tu vois, j'ai une école de yoga, j'ai beaucoup d'élèves et j'ai beaucoup de mal avec les
people. I'm a yoga teacher and I do have trouble with names. It happens often that there's no more need to put labels on everything anymore, so I tend to get wrong with names. And once while finishing meditation, I could see that consciousness was everywhere, and I was looking at an object on the floor. And what came from deep within is the name of that form, that object, is me, and it's the self. Everything that you see is called me. It's called the self.
Que l'essence de la blague s'intègre. Entendez-vous ce que je dis?
Oui.
Et quand tantôt, là, j'ai posé une question, j'ai pas eu de réponse, parce que j'avais arrêté de parler, mais n'oubliez pas, je dis pas que j'ai une attente, mais plus je vous regarde, plus je vous écoute, plus j'ai envie d'attendre quelque chose.
The more I listen to you, the more I want to wait for something. And I also know that there's no need for it. This gift, this wrapped present. If you see me unclothe myself, then it's my consciousness. It's consciousness itself. The consciousness. It's a habit, automatism,
C'est intéressant
to say my consciousness.
votre rapport, par exemple, à la nudité, par exemple, au Québec.
I don't know how you feel about nudity, but in France, when we talk about nudity, it creates a...
C'est ça.
Mais par exemple, avec la réalisation, tu es dans le vécu direct.
With realization, you're living right now, so there's no conditioning anymore. You are like the baby, like a baby, like a child.
Il fait 35 degrés, pourquoi les gens ils sont habillés?
And I remembered, telling my mom, it's 35 degrees outside, and why people like I wearing clothes? So I'm not saying that I went out naked, but
tu vois, pour dire, là tu vois ce que tu
but
dis,
what I'm trying to say is, what you're saying right now, you want to unclothe yourself, it might appear as crazy to human beings, to people, but to consciousness, it is so much into this direct experience, and all those programs that are added on, we keep them just so, just so to stay and to blend into those social interactions. But we don't believe anymore. We don't believe in a piece of paper with a 50 written on it that it means money. Or that we see a coin and it means money or it has value. It doesn't have any value. Money is taken from a hand and given to another one. But there's no more. There's no one anymore to believe that there is a value behind it. There's so many concepts that drop. And when this shift happens, don't we feel, or when we reach where we get close to the shift, does the mind feel like it's going to go crazy? Yes, because the ego tries to hold, and how can I handle that? But how can something that is finite, the ego, the mind, how could it handle what is infinite? So the only thing to do is to surrender. There's nothing to do. Has it been hard for you? No, it was very progressive, but I know some for who it's been very hard. I've asked about this. There was a process, and you said no, and now you say that it was progressive. Both are true. The mind has trouble with that. I have a question about the shift. Some say that it's a change of perspective. So it's progressive, yes, but there's a moment where that's it. This is it. Sometimes people don't even realize that it happened because it's so subtle. But what happens is quite simple. It's like you have two weights on a scale. So to consciousness, to most of people, it actually invests itself more into the relative. So it invests in what is perceived and sensations, and with this spiritual path, if there's one, or sometimes it just happens spontaneously, all of a sudden. And so it starts actually focusing on what never moves, never is impacted. And this is where the shift happens. And this world that we think is so real, to our eyes, for a time, it feels like it's absolutely fake. To be quite radical, it's like it's already dead. Because anything that can transform is actually destined to turn into dust. So what is left when there is only this?
Ça fait le ménage. Il reste plus grand-chose.
Well, it does do a bit of cleanup.
Ouais. Et quand il y a cette bascule, il y a tellement plus de...
When this shift happens,
on n'est même plus l'acteur du film.
we're not even the actor in the movie anymore.
Dans le vécu, c'est assez
in the experience,
spécial, c'est-à-dire que tout ce que vous faites,
it's quite
vous
special.
le faites sans qu'il y ait personne pour le faire.
Whatever you do it, but without anyone doing it. No one is driving, no one is talking, no one is walking. It just can happen peacefully, almost as if it's not perceivable, or maybe it is, it becomes perceivable.
Et après ça revient.
I can see that I keep having little shifts. I can see this consciousness, I can feel it, but I'm still moved, I'm still impacted, I still have so many emotions. And then, whoop, a little moment of serenity. And then, whoop, I go back into it. Well, you tell it yourself, actually. When you talk, we can see that it's not quite clear yet. You say, I still have emotions. And then you say, I am in consciousness. Underlying that, there's the idea that you're something else than consciousness. There's still the idea of a movement, a motion between one point and another. But that's not true. You're not in consciousness, you are consciousness. It's not a state, it is what you are. What is the common thread between when you're in life and living your life and when you're meditating? What is the common thread? You don't have to go through meditation, whatever, but rather, what is the common thread, whatever happens in your life? If you take a step back from the image you have of yourself, it can actually change, it can change forms, it can shape-shift. Yes, if you don't resist, yes, it can. And you can do that all your life. It will, yeah, it can help, yes. When you are consciousness, pure consciousness, that you already are, yes. If you are identifying as pure consciousness, then there's just an emotion that is arising, it's just an emotion, that's it. The first Indian sages were called rishis, which means those who see, because it's important to see all the mechanisms, to see all this agitation, and make it quite very clear, see how it manifests. Most of the time where we don't feel good, the mind says, I'm tired. But it's not enough. The true question is, how is it when I'm tired? How does it feel? All the experiences that arise, and especially those that are not welcomed, we need to understand the mechanism so that we don't fall into it. You have to observe it to understand it, yes?
Non, il ne faut pas suivre les flashs. Les flashs du mental...
There are flashes that are happening, yes, but you have to not follow those flashes. If there's an emotional that is arising, something emotional, if you follow the flashes from the mind, we tend to follow the flashes. And there's a pain coming up, and the flashes, keep us into this loop. But if we let the flashes go and we stay in the body, it prevents us from leaving the experience in the body really. If there are flashes, you just let them pass, but you just don't follow them. You just stay now, because now heals everything, because there's no past, there's no doubt about future, no preoccupations. So if you are really now, you are free already. Now, you can transform illness. There's not even a need to transform everything. It's just a welcoming that is happening on its own. And physical pain, illness. If you are ill, you can observe it and welcome it. And you live it. But if you live it through the idea of I am a person, it is suffering. It is painful. If you think I am a person who is ill, it's different from being consciousness, observing neutrally this experience. Whatever the sensation, if you get into it, if it's physical, emotional, it is always the same. It's always a vibration in a space. Truly, that's it. That's nothing else. I don't know if that's clear. A vibration in a space, within a space. Well, I've seen the mechanism, but I haven't seen the whole of it. I know that it's easy to have thoughts, but not to get into the thoughts. That's where it gets tricky for me. It's hard to explain. How do you explain illness and pain? It's just an experience from and for consciousness, always the same. And it has a meaning. It's to bring you back to what you are. Suffering is there to bring you back where in you there's no suffering. It is made up to liberate you. It is a slap that turns your head towards the right direction. And if you don't listen, the slap will get harder and harder. There's not so many ways to realize yourself. Either you follow love and this impulse from the heart, or it will be suffering that will enter the game, which is mostly the case for people. And this is what's going to push you to liberate yourself from suffering. And not the same, and can be the two at the same time. Yeah, sure.
Avant d'arriver là, puis de comprendre ce mécanisme-là, ou d'accepter ce mécanisme-là, toujours juste être une victime de tout ce qui t'arrive.
D'être une victime.
D'être une victime de tout ce qui arrive, de tout ce qui peut t'arriver, que ce soit un accident.
We need to let go of the idea of being a victim of anything. It doesn't have to go that way. We don't have to go through those experiences. It feels like if you identify, you can feel like you're the victim of life, really. But if you're not drawn towards consciousness, then you'll always feel like a victim.
Dans le plan qu'on est là actuellement, pour ne pas avoir aucune conscience, ou vivre des choses, c'est machinal, je suis la victime de tout. Ouais. Ça ne veut pas dire que ma conscience va s'illuminer dans ici, ça peut être... Ça peut. Non, ça peut. Ouais.
Mais la conscience, elle aime aussi jouir de...
Consciousness likes to enjoy this state of a character that doesn't want to enlighten, which is why we're not here to save the world, because we know that everything has its place. There's no master, no enlightened person that would actually want to change or save the world. There might be compassion, but it's automatic. It goes from the heart. It comes from the heart automatically. But there's no need to save everything. You are already saved. You are consciousness that can't be impacted or touched or hurt. Compassion is not an emotion, it's a natural impulse. It's the same impulse that if your left hand is hurt, the right hand will go onto it and try and relieve it. Same when you're at a crossroad and a child wants to cross the road and there's a car coming up, and you just automatically, there's this thing that will protect, your hand will protect the child. It's spontaneous. It doesn't go through the mind. One last question. It is a lovely explanation for compassion. Can we talk briefly about intuition? Good question. When everything exists now, and since everything is now, what will happen has already happened. When there's a question is arising, the answer is already there. Otherwise, the question wouldn't arise. For a question to arise, the answer needs to be there already. And intuition is only is to live now, what is emerging naturally into this current of life. Every time you follow not this intuition but the current from the mind, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, consciousness must have something to live by going through the mind, but right there it's gonna be tight and contracted. So a good way to listen to intuition when you think about something in the future, you tend to use intuition for the future. If you feel like it's opening, then it's correct, it's good, it's right. If it's closing, means it might need an adjustment. Doesn't mean it's wrong, it's just maybe it's not entirely right. The mind thinks it's kind of almighty and all-knowing, but it's absolutely incapable of make your whole body, the 3 trillion of your cells and that are moving together and working together. The mind couldn't handle that really, and it's maintained in a perfect harmony. We think that it's solid, but it's not. It's actually maintained electrically. There's an intelligence that makes you digest the food when there's a part that the mind couldn't do that, even if it tried. Just listen to the intelligence of life. The body doesn't lie. Ultimate answers will never come from the mind.
On peut créer, c'est comme la pensée ou ce qu'on crée avec la pensée peut créer.
What we create with that thinking, but we don't really create. It's consciousness that is creating, but thinking.
Ça envoie une information au niveau quantique. On va parler scientifiquement.
Kind of send an information on the quantic level, and this thought, if it's intense enough, it will densify. I've been through a period of time which I call the wishing period. Every time I wanted something, it would appear. I would empty my mind and just focus my mind onto one thought and densify it, and then it just became automatic. And I don't even do that anymore. Because like Gerald would say, I am life and I trust life. Life does perfectly. Just for instance, earlier on,
Je disais, ah, ce serait sympa une petite pizza.
It would be nice to,
Et puis, comme
to
par
have a
hasard,
pizza.
La meilleure pizzeria
And
du
just
sud de...
randomly, the very best,
gagnante 2017, elle est juste à côté d'ici.
the very best pizzeria
Donc, en fait, et je le savais
is
pas avant,
actually just
mais c'est
around the
simplement
corner.
tout est parfait.
And I didn't know that before, but because all is perfect and the answer was already there before the question.
Si la question
If
est
the
venue,
question,
je mangerais bien une pizza, c'est parce que
like,
la
I
conscience
wish
savait déjà
I'd like to have a pizza, consciousness knew that there was a pizzeria round the corner.
Voilà, c'était déjà disponible, exactement.
It was already available. Yeah.
Voilà. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Je crois qu'on est le seul satsang au monde où on finit par...
I think that we are the only one in the world finishing a satsang talking about pizza.
On va faire des émules.
That should inspire people.
Merci.
Thank you.